was a review of every published study on the ketogenic diet for cancer in humans. And what it found was that the clinical trials using the ketogenic diet for cancer have, quote, largely failed to prove survival prolonging effects. Okay. Like, this was a review of all the keto for cancer studies, and they said this has failed to prove that it has any benefit. And of course, one of the best cancer studies done on dietary intervention was done by Dr. Dean Ornish for prostate cancer. And he proved that you can reverse the progression of prostate cancer with a plant-based diet, exercise, and stress reduction. Like, it's such a beautiful study. And anyone can Google Dr. Ornish prostate cancer, and the PDF of the study will pop right up.
Welcome to the Kurisko and Company podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lee Kurisko. Our guest today is Chris Wark. Chris is an author, speaker, patient advocate, and a wellness crusader. He was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer at the age of 26 back in 2003. He had surgery, but he did not undergo chemotherapy and treated himself with diet and other natural therapies. I read his book 2 or 3 years ago, and I was really impressed with how much information was in it. Cancer is a big part of my job as a physician, and it's a very common thing. I would suggest people read it even if they don't have cancer. Almost half of all men and about a third of women will have cancer at some point in their life. This book will open your eyes about some things most people don't know about and are really quite naive. Welcome, Chris. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, we're really happy to have you. So you have quite a story, quite a harrowing story about being diagnosed at the tender age of 26 years old with colon cancer. Tell us about how that diagnosis was made and how did you deal with it and what was your strategy to get well?
Yeah, well, I in 2003, I was having abdominal pain and for the better part of the year. And I thought it was maybe an ulcer, and I got some, went to the doctor, got some ulcer medication, tried some different things, and it just wasn't getting better. And it progressively got more and more uncomfortable and more painful. And so eventually I was referred to a gastro, and he did a colonoscopy. And when I woke up, he said, "You've got a tumor, a golf ball sized tumor in your colon." And of course that was like, what? Really hard to believe. And, I'm just coming out of anesthesia too. So, I mean, the whole thing felt like a weird dream, but they biopsied it, sent it to the lab, confirmed cancer, adenocarcinoma. And I was told, look, we got to get you into surgery right away and get this thing out of you before it spreads and kills you. And at that time it had not been staged. And so, and I have to say, I described myself at that time as a very typical cancer patient. And when I say typical, I mean, I did not know anything about cancer. I had no family or friends that had ever really gone through it. I've never seen anybody. I mean, I knew a few people that had gone through it, but I'd never really seen anyone close to me go through treatment. And so I just was like, okay, I guess this is what I got to do. Like, your whole life comes to a screeching halt when you get a cancer diagnosis. And there's a sense of urgency. Patients are often rushed into treatment that they don't understand. They don't understand. They may understand what the doctor says they're doing, but they don't really understand the risks, the benefits, the impact on, progression-free survival or long-term survival. So that was me. And I went in for surgery on New Year's Eve, December 30th, 2003. They took out a third of my colon. That's the large intestine, if anyone doesn't know. And then, and when I woke up, they said, "You're worse than we thought. You're stage 3C. We got everything we could see, but you're going to need 9 to 12 months of chemotherapy." And so, things kind of went from bad to worse. I initially was assured that, just have the surgery and it's probably stage 1 or 2. You can go home and just continue on living your life. But this changed the conversation quite a bit. And a couple things happened in the hospital while I was there. The first meal that I was served after they took out a third of my large intestine was a sloppy Joe. And I've become famous for the sloppy Joe story. And sadly, 21 years later, there's still hospitals serving sloppy Joes. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean,
I totally agree. Yeah.
This is the kind of food that they serve in prison. So anyway, that was a little bit of a red flag. I'm like, why? This is why are they serving such terrible food to me, the sick person, the cancer patient, and to the guy that just had quadruple bypass down the hall, right?
Right.
And then the other thing worth mentioning from my hospital stay was the day I was told you can go home today. My surgeon came in to check on me one more time, and we were just having a conversation about what's next. And I just happened to ask him, I said, hey, is there any food I need to avoid? Because, I guess lingering in my mind somewhere was just this, self-protection mechanism that I just wanted to make sure I didn't do anything wrong, right? I didn't want to eat something that would screw up the surgery or like dissolve the stitches or something, right? So, is hot sauce a problem? Anyway, his answer was, no, just don't lift anything heavier than a beer.
Okay.
That's it. So, I'm like, really? It's like, I get that you're trying to add some levity and, I'm going to make a joke or whatever. But, that was so telling, right? It was so telling that so many members of the medical community, the healthcare community, have no regard for nutrition whatsoever, or even lifestyle practices. And they have no advice to give you. And what I've learned since that time is that many, many doctors and physicians are just as unhealthy or unhealthier than you. So, it's like, don't expect health advice from a guy that's drinking too much, still smoking cigarettes. Like, there are doctors that smoke cigarettes, people. It's crazy. So, and many overweight and obese doctors. Anyway, so
Yeah.
I had not connected all the dots at that point. I was just sort of noticing some clues, right? Cracks in the foundation. I get home and I'm sobering up. I'm weaning myself off the pain medication. And as I really, kind of came to my senses, I started really thinking about my life and my health and my future and, what is to become of me? What is the Chris Wark story going to be, right? Is it just going to be, man, great guy, so sad, got cancer at 26 and, died young. And I was thinking about chemotherapy and I didn't know much about it, but I knew that it was highly toxic. And I had seen what chemotherapy does to humans. I had seen other humans who had been through countless rounds of chemotherapy and looked so frightening, right? I'll never forget being a little boy at church with my mom and seeing a cancer patient for the first time, a guy who was bald and emaciated and his skin was yellow. I mean, he just looked I'd never seen another person look that bad, right? And I was like, Mom, what's wrong with him? And she was like, oh, he has cancer, So anyway, I had those images in my head and I thought, that's me. This is what my future, this is what I'm going to become. So obviously I didn't like that idea. I'd say I had a healthy fear of chemotherapy because I just understood these drugs were really toxic and make you really, really sick. And there's a lot of suffering. And so anyway, I didn't know what to do. I just had this resistance to it. I didn't have peace about it. So I prayed about it. My wife and I are believers. And just one day we sat on the couch and I just said, God, I don't know what to do. If there's another way besides chemotherapy, please show me. And 2 days later, I got a book sent to me from a man in Alaska who was a friend of my dad's. And he sent me this book called God's Way to Ultimate Health by George Malcolmus. And I started reading the book. I'm like, okay, well, this God's way to ultimate health. And I think that it was like eliminating sickness through nutrition. I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, well, let's see what this is about. Well, I start reading it. It turns out George had colon cancer and was able to heal himself with raw foods and juicing, and in about a year, and didn't have surgery.
Wow.
His tumor healed. And I'm like, this is incredible. And that was in the late 70s. And he was still alive, 25 years later. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like this is the answer to my prayer. I asked for something, this showed up, and it gave me so much hope and encouragement that healing was possible. And to me, like that is the foundational belief that drives successful remission, that drives so many incredible healing stories. It's the belief that healing is possible. Because if you have that belief, it unlocks something in you. It empowers you to take massive action, right? And to not be sucked into this victimhood that's so prevalent in modern medicine.
Absolutely.
And I'd like to touch on that briefly, because what happens is patients go to the doctor, they get a cancer diagnosis, and the first question is, well, how did I get cancer? Right? How did I get cancer? What in the world? And they're often told by the doctor, well, we don't know, but it may be genetic, or it may just be bad luck. And that answer, genetics, bad luck, or bad genes, what that does is that actually victimizes the patient. What they're saying in so many words is, there's nothing you did to contribute to your current health situation. And therefore, because there's nothing you did, there's nothing you can do to help yourself. You are a powerless victim of disease. Your only hope is whatever treatments we recommend. And go home and enjoy your life and change nothing, right? You don't need to change anything about your life. You don't need to change what you eat. You don't need to take a hard look at your attitude and your relationships and your workplace. You don't need to stop drinking alcohol or doing drugs. It has nothing to do with the pharmaceuticals you're taking, even though the end of most drug ads say they may cause cancer.
Right.
Right. So, so the patient goes home in this state of victimhood, where they just say, well, my doctor said I don't have to change my diet. My doctor said it's just bad luck. Oh, well,
Yeah, if I
and
can just interject, and that's not just true for cancer, that's true for virtually all the common chronic diseases. Is it's just, they promote this passive attitude, just take your pills and do what you're told. And the frustration I experience as a radiologist that has had my eyes opened to the fact that most chronic disease is caused by nutrition is that I look at scan after scan after scan, and people have multiple chronic diseases related to diet, heart disease, fatty liver disease, gallstones, diverticular disease, et cetera, all caused by diet, and the physicians will say virtually nothing about it. So that just, I find that very frustrating.
yeah, it really is. And of course, type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. I mean, so many chronic diseases can be traced back to diet and lifestyle. And it's barely taught in med school, and our current healthcare system in the United States doesn't have a way to incentivize doctors to practice diet and lifestyle medicine. The incentives are all in procedures and drug prescriptions, and so financial incentives. And so anyway, obviously, I didn't know any of this stuff at 26. I just knew I had a diagnosis. I wanted to live, and this path had opened up to me. God opened a path up to me that was basically involved total personal responsibility. It involved radical life change, and it was a scary path, because it was a path that very few people had been down, and most people thought was a terrible idea. Doctors didn't like it. Friends and family members didn't like it. Right? Everybody thought I was crazy. But I just knew, I have this choice. I can choose the conventional path, or I can choose this holistic path. And the choice is up to me. And at the end of the day, I'm responsible for the outcome of these decisions. And I understand people will be affected, right? If I die, it will affect my loved ones, but I wanted to live. I was determined to live. And so that, and plus my faith, gave me just enough courage, just this tiny sliver of courage to embark on that path. And by the way, I didn't do much deliberation. I mean, as soon as I wasn't even finished with the book. I was like, I'm doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I went straight to Whole Foods, bought a juicer, loaded up the cart with vegetables and fruit, and was like, I'm going to figure this out. Like, I'm going to overdose on nutrition. I'm going to flood my body with as much good raw nutrients from the earth that God made for us as I can every day. And let's see what happens. And so I was excited about it. I was excited about the healing adventure, and simultaneously terrified. Mm-hmm. Right. So there was fear and excitement mixed together. And so I had a lot of pressure to, and I go into detail in the book, of course, but there was just a lot of pressure to do chemotherapy. And the first oncologist I had a consultation with said, if you don't do chemo, you're insane. And used fear to manipulate me to to basically sign up for chemo. And I'm just thankful because I had, the better part of a month. I was still in recovery from surgery, so they couldn't start me on chemo right away anyway. And so during that time, I just was able to really think and pray and read and research. And I found a naturopathic doctor, and I found an integrative oncologist who supported me, my decision. And I never went back. And I was just a no-show, right? I didn't go get the port. Mm-hmm. And I was scheduled, and they called my house a bunch of times, and they sent me a certified letter, and they tried to get me, but I was feeling so good. I mean, I was feeling so good from raw food, making these giant salads every day, and juicing and changing my life. Like, I was experiencing so much joy and bliss and enthusiasm and excitement and hope. Like, my life was changing so rapidly that most people around me, they couldn't keep up. Right. And that caused tension too. But, when you're on a radical life transformation mission, it's like, you just can't worry about what anyone else thinks about you. Right. And people who think you're crazy now, eventually they'll come around. Right. When you are successful, they will come around, and they'll realize that what you did had a purpose, mm-hmm. and that you weren't being stupid or foolish, right? That you had a vision and a goal and a determination, and and so anyway, I didn't have a whole lot of forethought to see myself doing what I do now. Then I had no plan to talk about cancer. I just wanted to survive. Didn't have any plan to write books, didn't have a plan to start a website or be on YouTube. YouTube didn't even exist in 2004 when I was in the thick of it. And neither did Facebook. So, I didn't even get any help from the internet at all. I went from book to book to book. That was everything I learned. It was just reading books. One book kind of mentioned some other books, and I'm like, oh, I need to read those, and then on you go. So, the shortest version of the story is I just created a simple daily routine to optimize my anti-cancer nutrition input, and started reorganizing my life. I started exercising. I spent a lot of time in prayer and in the Word, and really trusting God. And this forced me to step out in faith in a way that I never had before. Mm-hmm. And there were some really powerful verses that I latched onto right away in the beginning. For the first one was Romans 8:28, which says, "We know that God works all things for the good of those who love Him and who are called according to His purpose." And it's like, that's a tough verse when you're in the middle of tribulation.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right? That's a tough verse, because it's like, well, wait a second. God works all things. And that's not the good things. He doesn't work the good things for your good. They're already good,
Mhm.
right? He works the bad things for your good.
I know.
And so I just had to, I kind of slammed up against that verse and was like, okay, well, this is where the rubber meets the road. Do I believe this, that
Mhm.
God is going to work this for my good? And I chose to believe it, right? I
Mhm.
exercised my faith and I just said, okay, God, I'm going to trust you that you're going to work this for my good. I don't know how you're going to do it, but I'm just going to trust you. And I'm not going to worry. I'm not going to be afraid. Every time the fear would, the fear would creep in, I would just give it to the Lord. I would just say, I trust you. I'm not going to be afraid. I'm just trusting you with my life and my health and my family and my
Mhm.
future.
Well, it's funny that comment. Most people do experience some form of trials and tribulations that they're in their life, um, and you sort of wonder, like, why me? Why did this happen, or whatever? But this is a perfect example of your experience. Is that you've went through this experience, and you've learned, and you've spread that knowledge and helped so many people, which is something that you probably didn't see when you first had your diagnosis. Um,
No. And this
so.
is something I tell patients now is that I want you, there's this, a sense of loss when you're diagnosed with cancer. It's kind of like the end of the innocence, right? You're like, my life was so great before cancer. And you didn't even realize how great it was. And then you get this diagnosis and you're faced with this life-threatening illness and the fear and the worry and the anxiety. I mean, and you just wish you could go back, you just wish you could go back. But what I encourage patients to think is, and just to believe, is that your life will be better after cancer than it was before. And that's hard to imagine in the beginning. But
Mhm.
as you go through the process, you realize that it's a transformative experience when you face death, and you're facing death every day,
Mhm.
and your priorities are radically shifted, and all the things that you thought were important and that you wasted time and energy caring about or worrying about, they just sort of evaporate. The old expression is like, a healthy person cares about 1,000 things. The sick person only cares about one thing,
Right.
right? And that's getting well.
Mhm.
And of course, I cared about other things, my family, and but the list of things I cared about was shortened, right? It got very, very short. I just wanted to live. I wanted to survive, get my health back. I wanted to take care of my wife, be a good husband to her, and I wanted to be a dad. And she and I started talking about it after the diagnosis. We had not been trying to have kids, but then all of a sudden I was like, I don't know. I I really want to be a dad. And she did something that was so incredibly selfless. And she loved me so much that she was willing to start a family with me, not knowing if I was going to be around to help her raise this child. And we started trying, and she got pregnant right away. It was like, okay, here we go. A year after I was diagnosed, I was back in the hospital holding a beautiful baby girl. And I mean, it's like, okay, well, now I got something else to live for, right? First, it was I can't let my mom and dad and my wife bury me. Like, I cannot let that happen. And now I was like, and I got a daughter too. So now I got 4 people that I have to live for. And there's a lesson in that, which is, I call it the beat cancer mindset. And I kind of alluded to it earlier when I was saying the most important thing is that you have to believe that healing is possible, right? And then alongside that, you have to want to live. You have to want to live. And if you want to live, you have to have a reason to live. So it's a sort of a 2-part question. And I ask cancer patients this when I was doing a lot of one-on-one coaching and encouraging with cancer patients, and I still do, um, is I ask them, do you want to live? Yes or no? Do you want to live? And most people have never been asked that,
Mhm.
right? And when I was asked that question, it was kind of a scary question because I immediately understood the depth of that question, which was, some people have a death wish.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are self-sabotaging. They are sabotaging their health every day with their thoughts and their actions and their bad habits, their behavior. And it was like kind of a big, hard gulp, swallow moment, right? And I realized, maybe I have been sabotaging my health in ways that I didn't realize. But I also, in that, it was almost like it was a split second, but it felt like an eternity of me, of all these things, like all these ideas sort of percolating in my head at once. But then I also realized in that moment, like, wait a minute, I can choose to live. Even if I had a death wish up until this point, even if I was self-destructive in some ways, right? I can change that. I can stop and I can choose life. And so, I was like, yes, I'm choosing now. My answer is yes, now I want to live and I have a reason to live. And my reason, again, was those three people, my wife, mom, and dad. This is before the baby came. and so this is so critical for a cancer patient, or really anyone with a debilitating disease, right? Do you want to live? Do you want to get well? And why? Your reason could be something, you want to win a national Scrabble tournament. I don't care. Whatever it is, right? Like, what do you want to live for? What do you have to live for? Figure it out. And some patients don't have a strong will to live, and that's okay, right? Some cancer patients, they're at a time in their life where they kind of feel like their work is done. No problem, right? No problem. And those patients should not be drug along through, who knows, right? Through all these brutal treatments to appease family members and doctors who are trying to save their life when they're ready to go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I just, I think it's really important that each person evaluates their own life and what they want out of life, and that they're not coerced into treatment out of fear or obligation. And because those are the two motivators the reason people say yes to brutal cancer therapies, right? It's either out of fear, do this or you're going to die, or you have to do this because everyone around doesn't want you to die. And so anyway, I clearly wanted to live, and I had a reason to live. And that's what drove me. I mean, that's what motivated me every day. It's like, I have to live. And so I created a simple daily routine. I found a small support system, again, a naturopathic doctor and an integrative MD who had come out of retirement and was doing a few, not a whole lot, but a few integrative things like IV vitamin C. And he had been researching like glyconutrients, ace mannan, mannose in aloe, and had turned me on to that. And because of its immune supporting abilities, and so, but the wonderful thing about this physician, his name is Dr. Roy Page, and he's passed away because he was in his 70s 20 years ago, but is that he supported my decisions. He ordered blood work for me monthly. He ordered CT scans every 6 months. He just helped me keep an eye on things, and he was an ally. And he had been around so long. He had, in oncology, he knew how terrible the treatments were. He knew how ineffective they were. Right. And so he was under no compulsion at all to, coerce me or convince me to do treatments that he didn't really have much faith in, because he had been administering them his whole career. So So that was a blessing, and I learned through the process. I just learned to see God's hand working at every step of the way, every step of the way. And there are all these key moments in my cancer journey where the Lord showed up, mm-hmm. and he showed up in a big way. And I like to liken it to being, if you've ever gone hiking, mm-hmm. And if you've ever hiked a new trail, there's always a moment on the hike where you're like, are we lost? Right.
We've experienced that a couple times.
Yeah. And so what do? Well, you stay on the trail, and then hopefully at some point you see a little sign and you're like, oh, good. Oh, all right. Nope. Everything's good here. Yep. We're on the right trail. Right. You get that little signpost, And that's exactly how my cancer journey was, right? It wasn't like every single day God was like, you just dropping like miracles in my lap, but just there were just these key moments where he would just remind me, you're on the right path.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The information would come into my life that was confirming what I was doing. People would come into my life. You know, it was just amazing. It really
Mm-hmm.
was. And I talk about this stuff in Chris Beat Cancer, the book. And I feel like I am not special. God did not treat me in a special way. I think this is how he takes care of all of us. When you really step out in faith, when you're trusting him completely with your life and your health, when you submit and surrender to him, you know, it's like, and you step out of the boat like Peter, right? You're walking on water. It's like, you see him working in your life. Like you see the things that he's doing and the way he's ordained and directing your steps, like it says in Proverbs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a beautiful thing that the Lord really does direct our steps. We make plans, but he directs our steps. He closes doors that we don't need to go through, right? And he opens other doors. He will divert your path. He will intervene. And sometimes we get upset when things don't go the way we think they're supposed to go. And we don't realize, oh, wait a minute, there's a reason this didn't work out. And the reason is probably a good thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to not be upset. Just need to say, okay, all right, this is fine. God's got a better plan. He's got a better option. This delay is necessary, right? And so the cancer journey, the experience of being in the wilderness, like the Israelites, God took the Israelites out of Egypt, out of slavery, into the wilderness, which was really difficult. And the purpose of the wilderness was to teach them to trust him. It was to teach them to trust him, to obey him, and to change their hearts. And unfortunately, they failed, right? Their attitude, they grumbled and complained. They had bad attitudes. They worshiped other idols. They were sinful. I mean, they just basically blew it in every possible way. And because of their bad attitude and their bad behavior, the first generation of Israelites did not get out of the wilderness. They did not go into the promised land. And I believe that's such an important lesson for us in any adversity of life is, one, know that God did not bring you into this adversity to die. You need to believe that he will carry you through. There's a purpose for it. And you need to get busy figuring out God, what are you trying to teach me here? What needs to change in my life? You've got my attention. I'm surrendering to you. I submit to you. Like, what do I need to do to help myself and to get in alignment with your purpose for me? And if you do that, then you will shorten the length of time that you are in this difficult situation. But if you're stubborn and you get angry and you grumble and you complain, right? And you take this sort of narcissistic attitude that there's nothing that you possibly did wrong, right? And you become a victim and a complainer. I already said that, but you become a victim and feel sorry for yourself as if there's nothing you did. Then that will prolong your problem, right? And prolong your illness. So again, these were lessons that I learned. I mean, cancer taught me so much. It gave me so much wisdom that I did not have before. I was foolish and naive before cancer, and now I'm less foolish and less naive. I'm not going to call myself wise, but I have garnered some wisdom that I know is wise that I can pass on. And so that, trusting that God has a plan and a purpose for every season of your life, including the difficult seasons, is so important, and it's so powerful. And by the way, it gives you peace in the storm.
Right.
Right. You have that peace that surpasses all understanding, the peace that doesn't make sense, but because God's working, right? He is working. He's going to see me through this. He's going to deliver me. I'm going to submit myself to him, and he is going to honor me. at the right time, right? It says, submit yourself to God and he will honor you in the right time. And so I did those things, and I've done those things many times since then in difficult situations, right? That lesson and that wisdom that I learned at that time has been invaluable to me in my life. And again, this is not something special for me. It's not reserved for me. This is for every person, right? Every single person in every difficult situation. Like, God loves you. He wants to see you through it. He wants to carry you through it. And all you got to do is just surrender,
Mhm.
right? Surrender and say, okay, you got my attention. Like, what do I need to do? What do I need to change? And those are my two, that was the repeated prayer for me, right? God, show me what I need to do, right? A lot of us are asking, God, help me, show me what to do. And that's good. That's good to pray. But then also show me what I need to change.
Yeah.
And that's a different attitude, right?
Mhm.
That's like, okay, admitting I know I need to change. Show me what needs to change in my life. And so a major thing for me, and really every cancer patient I've ever talked to, and this is a powerful therapy, is forgiveness.
Oh yeah.
Forgiveness is so transformative. It's so powerful. It is healing to your heart and healing to your body if you will forgive every person who has ever hurt you. Because if you're holding on to anger and resentment and bitterness, that's called unforgiveness, right? Those are toxic emotions. They cause stress in your mind and your heart, and that translates to stress in your body. And we know that when you have stress in your body, your cortisol is elevated, which is a harmful hormone when it's elevated. And also adrenaline is elevated. And these hormones are very useful and necessary for human survival. But when you're in a state of constant stress every day and they stay elevated beyond, above a baseline normal level, they promote inflammation and they suppress your immune system. And those are the two key ingredients to cancer. Inflammation plus immunosuppression, you are on the cancer path.
Mhm.
You're not going to get it overnight, right?
Right.
But it's just, there's a trajectory, there is a cancer path. If you keep going down that road and living your life the way you're living, promoting stress and inflammation. And here's the thing about stress. When you're stressed, you're going to find a way to self-medicate.
Mhm.
And the way we self-medicate is through overeating. It's through
Right.
alcohol, it's tobacco, it's drug use, it's sex addiction, it's pornography, it's gambling, it's binge watching, it's social media, it's all these things that just compounding your health problems,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so very few of us deal with stress by surrendering to God and forgiving the people that have hurt us, right? And this is the most powerful way to do it and the best way to do it. So, and giving your fears and worries to God is one way you deal with stress, right? And then that type of stress, that's future-based stress. And then the stress that's coming from your past, it mostly has to do with people who've hurt you, which you need to forgive, and then your own guilt and shame for your mistakes, regrets, and that you just have to ask God to forgive you for, right?
Mhm.
You got to forgive yourself for your mistakes and then get right with God, right?
Mhm.
He loves us. Our Heavenly Father is quick to forgive.
Yeah. Well,
He's loving, and
forgiveness is sometimes easier said than done.
it's easy. It's easier said, but I'm going to tell you, the doing isn't hard either, right? It's not like there's no physical effort, right, to forgive. You don't have to leave your house. You don't have to exert any energy. You don't have to dig a ditch. You know what I mean? But we have that internal resistance to forgive, right? Like we want to hold on to the anger and the injury and the insult. And but I think once you just have this revelation of how harmful it is to you to hold on to bitterness and hold on to anger and resentment, then it becomes easy to forgive. And so like I had this epiphany and I was like, man, I kept bumping into this idea about forgiveness, right? I would just, just from book to book, I just kept popping up like, you need to forgive. Anger is a root cause of cancer, this kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, fine. Okay, I'll do it. And so I just started, in my quiet time or prayer time, and I just started thinking through my life. Okay, who do I need to forgive? You know, and thinking about being a little kid and like, oh, little kids that were mean to me on the playground, and, you know, and then like thinking about, you know, if you just kind of think through your life chronologically, right? As far back as you remember, you just start thinking about all the people that have come and gone, you know, friends and family members and teachers and coaches and coworkers and strangers, right? And these people will come up. They're all in there. And one by one, as they come up, I just say, God, okay, I remember this. This was hurtful. This person hurt me. And I don't want to forgive them, but I'm choosing to,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm choosing to forgive them, and I'm letting it go, and I'm giving it to you. They're all yours. I'm not going to carry this anger or resentment or bitterness anymore. I'm just laying it down. And I'm asking you to be merciful to them and to bless them. Jesus said, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Right. And so I'm trying to be like Jesus. I'm trying to take Jesus's advice right now. And I'm saying, I'm asking you to bless this person who hurt me. I'm forgiving them and asking you to bless them. That's the prayer. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and you can't do it. You can't pray a blanket prayer and just say, I forgive everybody. You just have to revisit each person by name, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that takes some time. But I'm telling you, I did that until I ran out of people, right? I just ran out. There was no one left. Like I cleared the slate. And then, you know, life happens and new people hurt my feelings or whatever, insult me, and I just forgive them right away. And it's just such a incredible tool or skill to master, just mastering the art of forgiveness, you know. And it's just a quick choice. Just Lord bless them. You know, that was mean, but God, I'm just asking. I forgive them. I'm asking to bless them, and I'm not gonna carry it. I'm not gonna let this person steal my joy. This is healing. I'm just telling you, folks. It is so powerful. You can do all the diet stuff and the supplements and the therapies and all, you can do all the chemo in the world. You can do it all. But if you're not willing to forgive, you may stay sick. You may not get well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And for some people, this is all they need to do.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like letting a weight off your shoulders.
Huge weight.
Yeah.
Massive.
Yeah. Just to backtrack, just so the listeners know, what exactly was the protocol that you did? It was plant exclusive, juicing, fresh produce, no animal products. Is that all correct?
Yeah, that's right. I started with a raw food diet. So it was all raw fruits and vegetables. I bought a juicer and I was juicing 64 ounces of carrot juice a day. That was about, 5+ pounds of carrots.
Wow.
Yeah, every day. And they used to sell Whole Foods before it was owned by Amazon. They used to sell 25-pound bags of carrots for juicing. And there was there was like, I guess enough demand that they would sell these. A bag that was as big as my torso. And you take that through the checkout and they know, oh, this guy's juicing. This guy's going to juice up these carrots. Right. And so, I was buying 25 pounds of carrots, about twice a week. And then I was making giant salads. And there's a picture of the giant salad on my book, Beat Cancer Kitchen, which is right there. And, I just kind of realized, like, I want to get every vegetable in my body every day. Now, that's not possible, but how can I get the most vegetables in my body every day? And that's a salad, right? And so I was like, well, this is easy. I can put broccoli, cauliflower, kale, cabbage, onions, mushrooms, avocado, peppers, sprouts, like bean sprouts, alfalfa sprouts, broccoli sprouts, sauerkraut or kimchi. I can sprinkle a little olive oil and apple cider vinegar on there and then spice it up with cayenne pepper and oregano and curcumin and garlic. And it's just this incredibly delicious salad. I mean, just the taste, flavors, like you wouldn't believe, right? All those spices and the sauerkraut and the veggies, and like, it's so delicious. It's so good. And so I just kind of played around with that and kind of came up with this concoction. And I was like, I can do this. I can eat this every every day. And I was like, if I can eat this every day, I can eat it twice a day. I can eat this for lunch and dinner every single day. Can't do it for breakfast, but I can do it for lunch and dinner every day. And so that was my starting point. I would make my juice every morning, drink juices, throughout the morning until lunchtime, have a big salad, juices in the afternoon, big salad for dinner, finish. If there's any juice left over, finish the juice. And that was my nutritional anti-cancer protocol. And this is still what we encourage people to do today that are in our coaching community. It's
Did
very
you have
simple.
issues? You're a pretty lean guy. Did you have issues with all that low calorie density food, like hanging on to body weight?
I did. Yeah. And I started out very lean.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always been thin. I'm 6'2", but I'm just a tall, skinny guy. And and so I went from, when I was diagnosed, I was maybe 155, which is still very, very lean, 6'2", down to 135.
Oh, wow.
So I was clinically underweight. And I did juice fasting and then the raw foods. And so the combination of that, I did lose more weight. And again, the lowest I got was like, again, 135, low 130s. But then it started to come back around. The weight started to gain back. So it's really the fasting is really what caused me to lose more weight. I lost some weight due to not, eating less from my colon tumor, right? I lost probably at least 10 pounds from that, and then lost maybe another 10-ish pounds once I went raw. But I did that for 90 days. And then my naturopath, he knew obviously my weight was really low. And so he said, why don't we add some more cooked food back into your diet so you just can get a little bit more calories? Mm-hmm. So we did that. So we added quinoa and brown rice and lentils and things like that, like starchy vegetables, cooked starchy vegetables. He suggested I eat maybe 1 or 2 servings a week of wild caught salmon or maybe some lamb. And at that time I was like, okay, I didn't have any dogma. I was like, if you think, so I did eat a little bit of animal food. Knowing what I know now, I don't think it's necessary. But anyway, I did that. And so I went from 100% raw for 90 days to 80% raw for years. And then so I just kind of dialed that in and just stuck with the program. And then, the weight came back and it was fine. I got back up into it's normal BMI range. And then eventually, just kept getting stronger, working out and over time. And now I'm I weigh 167 and I'm about as fittest and strongest as I've ever been in my life. And that's eating a predominantly plant-based diet still.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you make some points in your book that are interesting. One is that a lot of people think that they have healthy habits and they don't. Another point that you made I think is interesting is that people think they're unhealthy because they have cancer, but you say they have cancer because they're unhealthy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the joke is everybody thinks they're healthy. Right? Everybody thinks they're healthy and they don't realize that they're on the path to disease. And there's even people who think they're healthy and they're on prescription medications, right? They're taking multiple prescriptions and they're like, well, I'm healthy. You'll hear you just talking to them saying, well, I'm healthy, and I'm just thinking, you're not though. You have chronic health problems. You're not healthy, right? And so, but we've just been programmed by so much media and advertising and, to think that, junk food is healthy choice cookies, that kind of stuff. And it takes a sort of a disease crisis to snap you out of that, false belief that you were healthy this whole time. Because you weren't. You were on you can get out of bed, right? But most people now, especially, I mean, we've got this epidemic of obesity. And obesity is the second leading cause of cancer. Smoking's number 1. Smoking from cancer rates are going down because so many people have quit smoking. But obesity is number 2. It's the second leading cause of cancer. And alcohol is, I think it's number 3, depending on who you ask. It's up there. So, we've got people who are overweight or obese. They're drinking lots of alcohol. They're on the disease path. And then all of a sudden the disease finally manifests, and then they're in a state of bewilderment. How did this happen to me? I was healthy. So once you really start educating yourself and learning about health and nutrition and the rates of cancer in different parts of the world, which I talk about in my book, and there's all this incredible research on cancer. And it's like the rates of colon cancer in sub-Saharan Africa are 50 times lower than the US.
Right.
And that might have changed a little bit in recent years, but that was at a time when they were not eating any junk food.
Yeah.
Yep. And so it's like, wait a second, and what in that particular research, the researchers looked at a lot of different factors, and they ruled out it wasn't genetic. They didn't have any kind of genetic advantage. And they narrowed it down to the absence of what they called aggressive dietary factors. And that was namely animal food, animal products. These were Africans who were eating predominantly plant-based because they just didn't have access. And it's not like they didn't like meat. They didn't have any problem eating meat, and they would eat as much meat as you gave them.
Right.
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 It's hard to catch and kill animals. I don't know. People like, we just assume because we have all these factory farms and there's meat everywhere. It's hard to catch and kill animals 3 times a day.
Right.
If you're in the African bush, good luck. If you kill one once a week, it's a party, right? It's like a celebration. So they were subsisting on just very, very basic, plant foods, right? Root vegetables, corn, rice, things like that. So anyway, that's a bit of a rabbit trail, but the truth is pretty simple. God made all these wonderful foods for us, and that come from the earth. And by the way, we can eat animals. There's nothing, it's not forbidden. I don't have any religious problem with eating animals. But it's the excess consumption of animal food. That's what we're doing now because of factory farms that is promoting so much chronic disease. And of course, the processed food and junk food on top of that. Mm-hmm. So it's double trouble. But if you go far enough back in history, before the Industrial Revolution, before processed food was even a thing, you still find high rates of chronic disease among the wealthy.
Right.
Wealthy people, the aristocrats and the kings and the nobles, the wealthy landowners, they would eat lots of meat and dairy because that was rich people food.
Right.
Poor people ate plant food. They ate, barley and rice and oats and grains and corn and fruits and vegetables because they could grow it, right? But slaughtering a cow for beef or a lamb or a chickens, that's for rich people.
Right.
And so that's why many of the diseases that you mentioned earlier, and cancer is one of them, these chronic diseases that we suffer from are also known as diseases of affluence. They've been called that, categorized that for many, many, many decades, if not over 100 years or more. Diseases of affluence, and also Western diseases. Those are interchangeable terms because Western civilization, modern food processing, modern dietary habits are contributing to those diseases.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you're familiar with Dennis Burkitt, like way back early in the 20th century. He was an Irish missionary surgeon in Uganda who was working there and observed that the native population, they simply did not get the same diseases that the Western population got. And when questioned about how he would maintain his surgical skills, well, he said, I've got plenty of work from the Europeans living here that are still eating their Western-based diet. So it's been known for a long time.
Here's his book right there.
Right.
Well, a book about him. I have two. I have one. I have his book, and I've got this book. Yes, I love Dr. Dennis Burkitt. He's a personal hero.
Yeah. And like if you look at there's the numbers from Ghana, the breast cancer rates are 3% of what they are in the U.S. and in Asia in general. Eating traditional diet, the breast cancer rates are 20% of what they are in the U.S. Which sort of, as part of my job as a general radiologist, I read mammograms. But the unfortunate thing is most people aren't aware is that the power of screening mammography to actually save lives is actually really limited. You got to screen about 1,500 women a year for 10 years, every year for 10 years, to save one life from breast cancer death. But
Mm.
there's actually no evidence to show that you actually produce a drop in all-cause mortality, because the women that are diagnosed with breast cancer, a lot of them, somewhere between 2 and 10 of every woman that you save is getting treated for something that was never going to kill them. And surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation therapy all have their own intrinsic built-in mortality. So it is possible that you're actually canceling those things out. And in some countries, they actually do not do screening mammography. Switzerland being one, I think maybe France. They just looked at it and said, this isn't worth it. Now, if people are fully informed about mammography and they want to get a screening mammogram, I'm not opposed to that. But I think one of the limitations of the system is that people are really not informed. And in your book, you have some comments about screening and lead time bias and that sort of thing, making it look like it's working, but it's not necessarily working. Can you comment on those things?
Yeah. It's a rabbit hole for sure. But the simplest way to explain it is, when you screen women for breast cancer and you're trying to detect it early, what they have found happens is they are detecting it earlier. And because they detect it earlier, the woman technically lives longer. And of course, one of the best cancer studies done on dietary intervention was done by Dr. Dean Ornish for prostate cancer. And he proved that you can reverse the progression of prostate cancer with a plant-based diet, exercise, and stress reduction. Like, it's such a beautiful study. And anyone can Google Dr. Ornish prostate cancer, and the PDF of the study will pop right up. It's like dietary intervention, dietary and lifestyle intervention for the treatment of early stage prostate cancer. It's something, the title is something like that.
It's funny you mentioned that, because just earlier today, I was writing something about it, where I mentioned that. And he even did a study recently where a whole food plant-based diet helped with early stage dementia, which is, incredible.
I didn't know that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, just within the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, the study came out, and not everybody responded, but some people actually had dramatic responses. There was one guy, he was a bagpipe player of all things, and that was kind of his hobby, and he participated in that. He got to the point where he just couldn't do it. And he went on this diet for however long the protocol was, I forget, 3 months or something. And then he was able to resume playing the bagpipe and, going to different functions and so on. So it's incredible.
Great.
I remember way back when I stumbled down this plant-based rabbit hole, the first thing that introduced me to it was Dr. Greger's book, How Not to Die. And, I knew he was going to talk about a bunch of different diseases. I'm thinking, well, I wonder what the diet is for liver disease versus kidney disease versus, lung cancer or whatever. It's all the same diet.
It's all the same.
Yeah.
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 It's all the same. And, the challenge, and they even documented this or sort of notated this in Ornish's study. And there was a subsequent, I talk about both of these studies in my book, but the two prostate cancer diet and lifestyle intervention studies with the plant-based diet is that the patients who followed the program strictly had the best results.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like the patients who kind of halfway did it didn't have great results, right? The patients who actually did it, and that's the thing about a dietary and lifestyle program, is like you're going to have a variety of outcomes based on that person's willingness to actually eat the right food and not eat the wrong food, to exercise and not just sit on the couch, right? So, it's not just like a drug study where you can just take this pill every day. That's all you got to do. Like, that's pretty easy, right? That's really easy to take a pill every day or a few pills a day versus changing what you eat for months,
Right. Yeah.
or for a year as part of a study.
I actually early in my whole plant-based journey, which started back in 2017, I actually counseled a guy that was found to have early stage prostate cancer. And he was asking me, well, would you get the surgery? And At that point, I was still saying, well, I'd probably get the surgery, but there is this study by this Dr. Ornish that showed that, you could get a drop in the PSA. So he opted to not have the surgery. He went a whole hog plant-based, and he was getting better. His PSA was dropping. So it really does work. I mean, I'm not giving anybody advice here. You got to talk to your doctors about it, but it is something to consider for early to intermediate stage of prostate cancer.
Yeah, great study to know about. It not hard to read. It's very easy to read. It's not very long, and I send it anytime prostate cancer comes up. I'm like, read this, read this study, like, and then make a decision. This will inform you about a different option, different path.
Well, let me ask you something else. So Joyce and I, we talk to people whenever appropriate about this, and they may have diabetes, or we've talked to a few people with bad heart disease, and we kind of throw this out there. Well, there is evidence that you go on a plant-based diet, you can, get serious improvement and blah, 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 blah. I find it fascinating that the majority of the people don't pursue it. It's actually a minority of people that will actually grab that opportunity and run with it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, simply put, people don't want to change. That's the deal. A lot of people, I'd say most people, most cancer patients don't want to change. They don't want to change their diet. They don't want to give up their favorite foods. They don't want to start exercising, right? They just want their doctor to assume all the responsibility for their health, right? And they like the victimhood. And that sounds weird, but they like it. And I'm not, no judgment, right? We're all accountable for our own choices. But I realized pretty early on, I started chrisbeatcancer.com in 2010. And I realized pretty early on that, there's only a small percentage of cancer patients that I can really help. And those are the ones that are willing to change.
Right.
Right. Those are the ones that have this conviction of personal responsibility. And they just wake up and say, I've got to change my whole life. And if a person has that attitude, I can be a tremendous encouragement to them, because I've assembled all these interviews of people who've healed all types and stages of cancer. And I've interviewed tons of doctors and experts and researchers on nutrition for prevention and healing. And I mean, I've interviewed, Sarai Stancic, who healed her MS, and Dr. Brooke Goldner, who healed her lupus, all kinds of chronic diseases. So, but yeah, it really just boils down to the fact that people don't want to change. And it's
no, I think you're right. And people are irrational about it. I mean, people want that silver bullet that's going to make them slimmer, fitter, healthier. Well, this is kind of it. But the downside is you do have to make changes in the way you live your life.
Well, and let me speak to that. We've been conditioned to believe in the magic bullet, right? Mentality. And the magic bullet mentality, it is from the pharmaceutical industry, right? There's a pill for every ill. And so everyone wants a shortcut, right? It's much easier to take a pill every day to manage your diabetes than to radically change your diet and make healthy choices every single day, right? That's harder. It's not hard, but it's harder. And again, there are, a lot of folks are just in this mindset. They're just trapped in this mindset where they're like, I don't want to give up. I love steak, right? I love pizza. I love, Chick-fil-A, and it's like, I get it. Yeah, it all tastes good. Right. I get it. But what if changing your diet could actually heal you, could reverse your condition? Wouldn't it be worth it? So I do spend a considerable amount of time trying to convince and encourage people who are on the fence, right? That, look, just why don't you treat this? This is my best tactic, by the way. Feel free to steal it. Okay. My best tactic is, look, I know you're not excited about this, but why don't you just treat this as a personal experiment? Right? Treat this like a personal experiment. Give yourself 30 days, maybe 60, maybe 90, depending on the person, and the condition. But why don't you give yourself 30 days? Do this all the way, right? I'll give you the food. Here are the recipes. Here are the foods to eat, right? We'll make it as simple as possible. Just focus on eating like super healthy for 30 days. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to start exercising or anything. Let's just do the food and see what happens. Get your blood work checked in 30 days. Get it checked. If you got recent blood work, great. If not, let's get it checked. 30 days, super hardcore plant-based diet. Check it again. See what happens. And it's amazing. Blood pressure goes down, cholesterol goes down, blood sugar goes down, inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein goes down. It's like you see all these wonderful improvements in just 30 days. It doesn't mean everybody's just cured and super healthy in 30 days, but you see most folks, you see a dramatic and measurable improvement across multiple biomarkers. And then it's like, okay. And a lot of times they're like, man, I have more energy. I'm sleeping better. Like, so even those tangible benefits. And I've actually lost 5 pounds or 15 pounds or whatever. This is crazy. Wasn't even trying. I was just eating as much as I wanted,
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's
Well,
why.
one thing I'll tell people is your taste will change. I ate breakfast a little bit late today. It was about 11 or 12 and I was a bit hungry. And the first thing I ate was chopped collard greens and broccoli with a little bit of balsamic vinegar on it. And it was absolutely delicious. And I ate this big bowl and I kind of wish that I had another bowl. That would have been unthinkable a few years ago. But one of my concerns is people come in with these different conditions, whether it be cancer, diabetes, or fatty liver. These things that we just see over and over and over every day. They'll see their doctor, they give them the pill. There's maybe lip service to some sort of dietary counseling, but not really heartfelt, encouraging, radical change. And that validates the pharmacological approach to disease because it's coming from a doctor that this is what you do. And so when you have a conversation, like we go to church and a lot of old people there and, they're grumbling about their different conditions. And well, that type 2 diabetes that you have, I know a way you could, probably 90% chance you could get rid of it. And you sort of get this deer in the headlight look. Well, their doctor didn't tell them anything about this. So it has no, weight in their mind as far as being valid. And so I'm very critical of mainstream healthcare because it's like this doesn't even exist, as a therapeutic modality.
Yeah. Well, the word healing is so rarely used in medicine in terms of chronic disease, right? It's all about management. It's not about healing or reversal.
Well, that's where the money is.
That's where the money is. The money's in the management. And so, right. I know. If I would be a super rich guy if I had $1 for every time a patient said, well, my doctor said diet doesn't matter. Or my doctor said diet doesn't affect cholesterol,
Right.
Or my doctor said that diabetes, there's no cure for diabetes. It's like, I've heard them all. And it's like, okay. And then of course, you're a doctor, you're a doctor trying to give good advice to someone who's not technically your patient. And they're thinking in their mind when you're suggesting this, like, what is this guy, a conspiracy theorist or something?
Right.
Like, why wouldn't my doctor know if there was some way to, there's a bit of an arrogance, right? It's the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, people who know the least tend to be the most confident in their opinions.
Yeah.
And so, people who know nothing about nutrition, never read a nutrition book in their life, think that, well, my doctor said this, so, I think he knows what he's talking about.
Right.
And therefore I also know. And it's laughable, but also sad.
Right. Well, we've been talking for a while. There's another question I want to ask you, and I don't want to monopolize too much of your time, but we're working on this cancer documentary. I think you knew about that. And one of the individuals that we interviewed was Dr. Thomas Seyfried, who has this novel approach to cancer. He calls it the metabolic theory of cancer, where he puts people on ketogenic diets. And he has, in the laboratory with animals and with some isolated case studies, had some really dramatic results treating cancer successfully. Now, Joyce and I are 100% plant-based, but we don't want to be dogmatic. And if there is a therapy out there that could potentially help that's not plant-based, I don't think you can ignore it just based on sort of a dogma or an ideology. Um, Now, the way I look at it, I think that animal products are not good for us, and the less the better. On the other hand, one of the mistakes I think the ketogenic people make is they say, "Oh, um, there's this approach to cancer with ketogenic diet. Therefore, everybody should be on a ketogenic diet." Well, I would say that's about as logical as saying that chemotherapy can treat cancer. Let's put everybody on chemotherapy. Now, on the other hand, when we talked on the phone one day, he said that you actually can create a plant-based ketogenic diet. I suspect to be very unpalatable, but nonetheless. So, what are your thoughts on that metabolic approach to cancer?
Well, I first heard about it about 10 years ago, and it was very new. It's a very new idea, and I thought, wow, Seafried is making a really interesting case. Starving cancer cells, deprive them of glucose, so that makes sense. And cancer cells have a hard time metabolizing ketones, fatty acids. Wow, this is really fascinating. And I read some books about it and was really open to it. Now I was like, I don't know anybody it's worked for, right? And I think survivors are our best indicator of what actually works, right? Like the proof is in the pudding. Show me the survivors. But anyway, I was like, maybe he's onto something. And so I followed it for years. And what I found was it wasn't working. It didn't work. I followed survivors, cancer patients doing it. It wasn't working for them. And then I started really, then studies started getting published. Most of them were animal studies. And I dug into those studies and I found, well, these studies aren't even that great either. And so like, for example, they would do studies where they would give they put rats on a ketogenic diet, but then a lot of times they would combine it with something else. Like one of the early ones was like 2013. They put rats they implanted human brain cancer into rats, which by the way is an impossible scenario because brain cancer doesn't metastasize into any other part of the body.
That's true. Yeah.
Anyway, they put brain cancer in rats in their bodies, and then they put them on a ketogenic diet with hyperbaric oxygen, and they lived 56% longer, which in rat days, they lived 20 days longer than the rats that were in the control group, and they still died of cancer. So it was like, there's a lot of studies like that. I'm like, well, this isn't like, what does this even mean? And so I ended up writing an article. It's called The Evidence Against the Ketogenic Diet for Cancer. You can find it at chrisbeatcancer.com. If you just type in ketogenic, you'll find it. But, there was a 2018 review, and there might be something, and on a 2018, it sounds like, oh, well, that's ancient history, but I'm not aware of any newer comprehensive studies since then. There may be, but there was the biggest study to date. There was a review of every published study on the ketogenic diet for cancer in humans. And what it found was that the clinical trials using the ketogenic diet for cancer have, quote, largely failed to prove survival prolonging effects. Okay. Like, this was a review of all the keto for cancer studies, and they said this has failed to prove that it has any benefit. So, am I still open to it? Sure. But what I found in following Seafried's work and watch his interviews, they're not recommending it as a standalone therapy because they've realized it doesn't work. They're now just trying to couch it with other drug therapies, with chemo. So they've sort of, from what I'm observing from my vantage point, they just seem to have pivoted from espousing it as this incredible anti-cancer diet to this is the best anti-cancer diet to do with chemo, right? Or to do with a multi-drug, off-label drug protocol or something like that. And, at the end of the day, I look at survivors, and we have got so many incredible survivor stories. I'm interviewing them constantly and sharing these stories, and you just see the common threads. If you study the survivors, you find that the plant-based diet is absolutely central to almost every radical remission cancer survivor story, people that healed against the odds. It's eating an abundance of fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, herbs and spices, legumes, whole grains. Like, these are wonderful anti-cancer foods, and not eating animal food, or eating very little, like cutting back from 3 times a day to maybe a few times a month, right? So it just, it cuts way, way, way back. And so I have another article that your listeners might find interesting along those lines, which is about how protein fuels cancer growth. And again, multiple studies documented in both of those. I mean, there's a lot there to dig through. But I summarize the studies. But there's the article is called "The Animal Protein Cancer Connection."
Yeah. Now I
And
understand that plant protein is not so much of a problem.
it's not. It's not.
Yeah.
In fact, there was an 18-year study following 6,000 middle-aged people, age 50 to 65, and it found that those who ate a high-protein diet, and high protein is 20% of your calories from animal protein.
Yeah.
Okay?
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot, but it's not like carnivore where people are just eating only meat all day, every
That's
day.
insane.
But these people they were eating 20% of their calories from animal protein. They had a 75% increased risk of death.
Yeah.
And a 400% increased risk of dying from cancer compared to those who ate a low protein diet, which was less than 10% of calories from animal protein. And by the way, that fourfold risk of death from eating 20% of calories from animal protein is almost the same as the risk of death from cancer death from smoking. Now, the people who ate high amounts of animal protein in the study did not have any increase in risk.
Sorry, I think you said animal protein that did not eat the animal
It did
protein.
not. Yeah,
Okay.
the people in the study who ate high amounts of plant protein, I'm sorry if I misspoke, did not have an increase in risk. So it's exactly what you're saying. The plant proteins do not have this pro-cancerous effect when consumed in high amounts as animal proteins. So there really is, and again, the difference between eating 10% of animal protein and 20%, that was a huge difference. And so again, I mean, there are different opinions out there, and I really try to stay unbiased. I'm not a vegan, so I don't have a vegan bias. But again, a small amount of animal protein may be helpful to health, or just not enough to be harmful. And if you look at the blue zones, most of those communities, they're not strict vegans, but they just eat predominantly plant-based and a little bit of animal food here and there a few times a week or a few times a month. But it's just not nearly at the excessive levels that we eat today.
Yeah. I think that there is an unclear area. Like, I think generally speaking, the less the better when it comes to animal protein. It's my suspicion, and it's, shared by Dr. T. Colin Campbell, that 0 is probably best, but it would be impossible to design a study to prove that.
Right.
There are some epidemiological studies comparing disease rates of different diseases in different countries, plot them on a graph. Well, when you sort of do the best fit to the graph, it almost invariably for these different diseases does go through the origin point where there's 0 intake, but you can't prove that is necessarily the best. We don't eat any. I like proving the point by, not eating any animal products for the last 8 years. I'm in very good health. I work out like a maniac. I'd say probably most 25-year-olds probably couldn't keep up with me in the gym. And the last year and a half or so, I've been more on a strength-based type of workout. And Joyce bought me a bunch of shirts. I can't fit into them, because my shoulders and my chest and my upper back have grown so much. I can't wear these things. And that's eating entirely plant-based without being super obsessive about, my protein intake.
Right. And it's amazing. There's so many incredible world-class athletes now that eat 100% plant-based diets,
Mm-hmm.
they're performing at levels that you and I couldn't even dream of performing at, right? And it just shatters this idea that you need animal protein to be fit, healthy, and strong. You don't.
Right.
You don't need it. I mean, the one caveat, and I think Walter Longo, one of his studies, kind of pointed this out, and I think it seems like there's validity to it, is that in older age, it's a little harder to synthesize protein from plant food, and that animal protein could be beneficial in small amounts, just to but again, it's for the vast majority of people, it's like we just eat way too much of it.
Yeah. Well, actually, Dr. Greger has done an analysis on that. And, for older individuals, there are some individuals that probably, like older people, they're not getting enough protein, but they're probably also not getting enough calories in general. And these are the frail elderly. The non-frail elderly, in his analysis of the literature, when they're given protein supplements, there's like zero benefit. And when it comes to sort of building strength and whatnot, the only determinant is that they do strength training. It's
Yes.
really not whether or not they get a protein supplement or not. But anyways, we could go on for hours. I mean, it's been
I love it. No,
phenomenal.
I'm fascinated by that.
Yeah. I mean, I just loved geeking out on this stuff. But like I said, we need to be respectful of your time, and we really appreciate it. We'd love to have you back sometime.
Love to do it. Fun to talk with you. Thanks again for the opportunity to share my story and some of the things I've learned with your audience. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's very, very compelling what you have to say. So thanks very much.